Okay, let's dive into something really fascinating today. Imagine having, I don't know, a simple phrase, something maybe even a bit counterintuitive,
Mhm.
that could just instantly cut through tension in arguments, but build some goodwill, get someone who's totally dug in to actually hear you. Sounds a bit like a communication superpower, doesn't it?
It really does. And the sources we're looking at today suggest something remarkably close to that actually exists, and it's centered around a very specific kind of sympathy.
Exactly. We've got these excerpts right here, and they really unpack the profound power of sympathy in how we interact with each other.
Mm.
So our mission in this deep dive, and it's tailored specifically for you based on the material you shared, is basically to pull out the core insights.
Yeah.
We want to understand why this works and then look at some really striking real-world examples the sources give just to see how it plays out.
Yeah, the goal is to give you the key takeaways, kind of quickly and clearly. And probably the most impactful idea they kick off with is this, well, they almost call it a magic phrase.
Hmm.
It seems simple, but there's a lot going on underneath. I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
Wow, that line is doing some serious heavy lifting, isn't it? The sources argue you can find a real, genuine sincerity behind it, even when you're dealing with someone you might find, incredibly frustrating or even antagonistic.
Absolutely. And the justification they give for that sincerity is pretty profound, actually. They basically propose that if you have the exact same combination of another person's body, their temperament, their mind, environment, all their life experiences, they even use Al Capone as a really stark example, you would, almost by definition, be exactly who they are. You'd feel exactly the same way.
Mm.
Huh. So the flip side of that is, well, you deserve maybe very little credit for the person you turned out to be, given your unique circumstances.
Hmm.
And maybe people who seem, I don't know, irritated or bigoted or just plain unreasoning,
Mm-hmm.
they deserve very little discredit for who they are, given theirs. It forces this, complete shift in perspective. It really does.
It's the core of that old saying, isn't it? There but for the grace of God go I. The sources really try to move us away from judgment and towards, well, encouraging pity, feeling sorry for, and fundamentally just sympathizing with others.
And here's the really eye-opening claim from these sources, I thought.
Yeah.
They state that a staggering three-quarters of the people you meet are absolutely starving for sympathy, like hungering and thirsting for it.
That's a huge number, a massive chunk of humanity.
Yeah.
And the power dynamic it suggests is pretty significant. Offering that sympathy, that validation they're craving, they say it can fundamentally change how people feel about you. It can, well, make them love you, is the phrase they use.
Which brings us right to the core principle they're highlighting here. Principle 9 in the source material. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Simple as that, but powerful. Let's see how this actually plays out in some of the stories they tell. They're quite fascinating.
Okay, yeah. The first one is a classic, involves Dale Carnegie himself.
Yeah.
A moment of very public messing up.
Ah, yes. The broadcast about Louisa May Alcott. He got the town wrong. Said she lived in Concord, New Hampshire instead of Concord, Massachusetts. And apparently doing it once wasn't enough. He said it twice. Ouch.
Which, as the sources describe it, led to a pretty intense reaction. He got flooded with letters, telegrams, stinging, indignant, even insulting stuff. They paint this picture of like a swarm of hornets attacking him. One letter in particular from a woman described as a colonial dame in Philadelphia. She vented what he called scorching wrath. Apparently, he felt she couldn't have been more upset if he'd accused Alcott of being a cannibal.
Wow. That must have been tough to receive.
Yep.
What was his first, gut reaction?
Oh, completely defensive. His first impulse, the sources say, was just pure defensiveness. He felt like writing back, blasting her for being rude, telling her off, the kind of angry response anyone could manage.
Right, the easy reaction.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. What did he do instead?
He consciously reined it in, controlled that temper. He decided, okay, I'm going to be above fools here. He turned it into a kind of challenge, almost a game for himself. Could he turn this hostility around? Could he make her friendly? And this is where he explicitly applied the principle. He thought, okay, hold on. If I were her, with her background, her pride in Concord, I'd probably feel exactly the same way. He actively chose to sympathize with her viewpoint, to understand why she was so upset.
Okay, so no angry letter back. Instead, when he was next in Philadelphia, he reached out differently.
Totally differently. He called her on the phone. And he started by thanking her for taking the trouble to write, acknowledging her effort first. That's smart. Then immediately offered a really genuine apology for his stupid blunder.
How did she react to that?
Mm.
To him calling and apologizing like that?
Well, the sources describe this pretty amazing shift. Her initial tone, which was apparently very formal, cultured, sharply questioning, it started to change as he just kept apologizing and expressing sympathy for her distress. She actually started apologizing herself, admitting she'd lost her temper.
And he kept sort of batting the apology back, saying he was the one at fault.
Yeah, exactly. He insisted, no, I'm the one who should apologize. He said something like any school child would have known better. It seems kind of counterintuitive, taking more blame, but it just cemented his sympathetic position, didn't it?
And that softening, that opened the door for her to explain why it was such a big deal to her.
Precisely. She then felt comfortable enough to share her deep pride in being born in Concord, Massachusetts, her family's history there for 2 centuries. She explained why his mistake felt so personal.
And he reinforced that sympathy one last time, didn't let it drop.
He really doubled down, assured her his distress over the error was actually greater than hers because it reflected badly on him, not the state. He even invited her to write again if she found other errors, flattering her a bit by noting how rarely people of her standing and culture take the time.
So what was the final outcome after all that?
Her reply was a complete turnaround. She wrote back saying something like, I really like the way you accepted my criticism. You must be a very nice person. I'd like to know you better.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the lesson isn't just say sorry. It's about that preemptive sympathy, really understanding their side that completely disarms someone, and it shifts the whole dynamic. He got more satisfaction, he said, from making her like him than he ever would have from just hitting back.
Absolutely. It really highlights, controlling that initial defensive spike and choosing consciously to see it from their emotional viewpoint first.
Okay, let's switch gears. A higher stakes example now from politics. This one involves President Taft.
Right, President Taft. According to the sources, he was constantly dealing with these thorny problems in human relations. Standard for the job, I guess. This specific one involved a very ambitious mother who was lobbying hard, really hard, with senators and congressmen helping to get her son a government appointment, a technical one.
But Taft went with a recommendation from the technical bureau chief, right? Appointed someone else based on qualifications.
He did, which, predictably, led to an angry letter from the mother. She called him most ungrateful, demanded to know how this was her reward for helping his administration get some bill passed.
Okay, a clear quid pro quo attempt. The source mentions Taft's first thought was severity.
Yes, his instinct was a harsh reply to what he saw as, pretty inappropriate pressure. But the key insight here, the source says, is that he was wise enough to pause. He apparently put the letter in a drawer and locked the drawer for 2 days' delay. That pause, that physical act of putting it away, it's presented as real wisdom.
2 days. Okay, so after cooling off, what kind of letter did he send?
He wrote, and this is a quote, just as polite a letter as I could. He started by acknowledging her feelings, stating he fully realized a mother's disappointment in that situation. Then he explained his constraint. Look, this appointment isn't about mere personal preference. It needs specific technical qualifications, and he had to follow the Bureau's expert advice. And he finished by expressing hope for her son's future in his current role. Kind of a gentle letdown.
Right, so sympathetic opening, clear, objective reasons, hopeful closing. How did that land with her?
It seemed to work, at least initially. The sources say she was mollified. She even wrote a short note back, apologizing for her first angry letter.
Okay, so sympathy worked. It diffused the immediate anger, even though she didn't get what she wanted. But the story doesn't quite end there, does it? There's another twist.
There is indeed. Sometime later, Taft gets another letter, supposedly from the husband this time, but suspiciously it was in the same handwriting as the mother's first letter. Uh-oh. And this one really escalated the drama, big time.
Oh, right. This is the one claiming she was suffering from nervous prostration and a most serious case of cancer of the stomach, all because she was so disappointed. And basically saying appointing her son was the only cure.
Yeah, an extraordinary claim, bordering on the unbelievable. So how did Taft handle that level of, emotional blackmail?
He stuck to his guns, but also stuck to the principle. He wrote back to the husband, expressed hope the diagnosis wasn't accurate, sympathized with his sorrow over his wife's supposed condition, but he stayed absolutely firm on the decision, said it was simply impossible to withdraw the name already submitted.
Wow. Sympathy but firmness, and the outcome. After the second round...
It's almost comical, really. The guy he appointed was confirmed. And then, just 2 days after Taft received that second letter about her dire health, the mother and father were apparently the first 2 people to greet Mrs. Taft and me at a White House musicale. all smiles.
Despite the wife having been, as the source puts it, so recently in articula mortis at death's door.
Huh. It really hammers home the source's point, doesn't it? That Taft learned the enormous chemical value of sympathy in neutralizing the acid of hard feelings. Even when you absolutely cannot give someone what they want, acknowledging their feelings, sympathizing with their position, especially combined with that wise delay before responding, it can prevent things turning really sour and bitter.
It's a powerful mix, isn't it? Empathy, but also really clear boundaries. Let's look at a different setting, more of a common workplace thing. Jay Mangum, the elevator and escalator guy.
Right, the conflict with the hotel manager, Rick. Escalator repair time. Rick wanted it shut down for only 2 hours max, worried about guests. But the repair really needed 8 hours. Classic conflict.
So instead of just arguing about the technical necessity, Mangum started with empathy. He went straight for the manager's main concern. He called Rick and said something like, "Rick, I know your hotel is super busy and you want to keep the escalator shut down really minimal. I totally get your concern about this, and we want to do everything we can to accommodate you."
He just completely validated Rick's priority right off the bat. Didn't dismiss it. So then, how did he introduce the need for the full 8 hours?
He framed it cleverly, not as his need, but in terms of Rick's own goal, minimizing disruption. He explained that rushing it, doing a shorter job now, could actually lead to more serious damage later on, and that could mean a much longer shutdown, potentially several days.
Ah, connecting it back to Rick's big fear, major guest inconvenience.
Exactly. He followed up immediately with, "And I know you would not want to inconvenience your guests for several days."
Genius. So by presenting the 8-hour option as the best way to avoid that bigger nightmare scenario, and therefore the best way to achieve Rick's own goal, Mangum made the necessary time seem like the better choice for Rick.
And apparently the manager had to agree that an 8-hour shutdown was more desirable than several days. The source notes Mangum won him over easily and without rancor, just by sympathizing with his desire and aligning the solution with that desire.
Yeah, this really highlights that sympathy isn't just, feeling sorry for someone. It's a tool to show you actually understand their priorities, what matters to them. And then you frame your solution as the best route to their goal.
A very practical, useful application. Here's another lovely example from a totally different field, music teaching. Joyce Norris, a piano teacher, and her student, Babette.
Oh yes, Babette and the fingernails. A classic challenge for piano teachers, I imagine. Long fingernails are a serious handicap for proper technique, the source says. But Babette apparently took immense pride in her exceptionally long ones. Tricky.
Definitely a potential conflict. But Mrs. Norris was smart about it. She didn't just wade in and criticize before the first lesson. She knew Babette was proud of them, didn't want to discourage her right away. She waited for the right moment.
And when she did bring it up, she didn't lead with a demand or a criticism, did she?
Not at all. She started with genuine appreciation, complimented Babette first, said something like, "Babette, you have such attractive hands and beautiful fingernails," acknowledged their value to Babette.
Smart. And then she connected trimming them to Babette's own goals.
Precisely. She framed the change entirely around helping Babette achieve her own desire, to play the piano as well as you are capable of and as well as you would like to. She explained the practical upside. It would make playing much quicker and easier.
And she acknowledged it wouldn't be easy for Babette. Called it a sacrifice.
That's crucial, isn't it? She explicitly called trimming them a potential sacrifice. That implies sympathy right there. I get it, this is hard for you. The source says she implied, "I sympathize with you, I know it won't be easy." But she balanced that sympathy by focusing on the reward. It would pay off in your better musical development. And she finished gently, not with an order, but an invitation. Just think about it.
The initial reaction wasn't exactly positive, though, was it?
No, apparently Babette made a definitely negative face. And when Mrs. Norris mentioned it to the mother later, she also got a negative reaction. So it didn't look like it worked. Not right away.
But then, the surprise the next week.
Exactly. Babette walked in for her next lesson, and her fingernails were trimmed.
Amazing. How did Mrs. Norris react then?
Again, spot on. Lots of praise, acknowledged the effort, complimented Babette for making such a sacrifice. And when she thanked the mother apparently said, "Oh, I had nothing to do with it." Babette decided entirely on her own. Said it was the first time Babette had ever trimmed her nails for anyone.
That's just incredible. She didn't demand, she didn't forbid. She empowered Babette by valuing what she valued, the nails, acknowledging the difficulty, the sacrifice, and linking the change directly to the student's own musical goals. The sympathy made the tough choice feel like Babette's own powerful decision.
Exactly right. It wasn't about following the teacher's rule. It was about unlocking her own potential. Really smart.
Okay, our final story is about navigating, well, extremely challenging personalities. Legendary impresario Solhuruk and the great but famously difficult Basso Fyodor Chaliapin.
Hurok, he dealt with a lot of, let's say, temperamental stars. And the source says he learned the hard way the necessity for sympathy, sympathy, and more sympathy. Chaliapin especially sounds like quite the character. Hurok called him a constant problem, a spoiled child, and, quite bluntly, a hell of a fellow in every way.
Okay, a hell of a fella.
Yeah.
So how would this typically play out right before a big performance?
Well, a common scenario, apparently, was Chaliapin calling Hurok just before curtain time, claiming he was completely unable to sing. You know, my throat is like raw hamburger, it is impossible for me to sing tonight. Total drama.
Right. And knowing his temperament, arguing back would probably just make things worse. So what was Hurok's sympathetic countermove?
He didn't argue, not one bit. His standard approach was to immediately rush over to Chaliapin's hotel, dripping with sympathy.
Dripping with sympathy. I love that phrase. It paints such a picture.
Doesn't it? He'd arrive and immediately join in the morning. What a pity, my poor fellow. Of course, you cannot possibly sing. Complete agreement. And he'd instantly offer to cancel the whole engagement.
Okay, so extreme sympathy validates the feeling, offers to cancel. That seems key. But then came the pivot, right?
The crucial part was immediately mentioning the consequences of canceling, but framing them entirely in terms of how it would affect Chaliapin, not Hurok or the audience. He'd say something like, "It will only cost you a couple of $1,000s, but that is nothing in comparison to your reputation."
Hitting him where it hurts, perhaps, but framed sympathetically. His money, his standing.
Exactly. The over-the-top sympathy opened the door, made Chaliapin feel heard. And then connecting the decision to sing or not sing directly to his own self-interest, avoiding financial loss, protecting his precious reputation, provided the necessary motivation.
And what was the typical result of this performance by Hurok?
The sources say Chaliapin would almost always shift. He'd go from impossible to suggesting, well, maybe come back in half an hour, see how I feel. Eventually, he'd consent to sing, though often with some face-saving condition, like demanding Hurok announce to the audience that he had a terrible cold.
And Hurok would just go along with it, even lie about the cold.
Apparently so. Anything to get the star on stage. It's an extreme example, for sure, but it really shows how you might need to adapt the level of sympathy to match the level of temperament you're dealing with. And again, how crucial it is to link the outcome you want to the other person's own goals and motivations, whether it's money, reputation, or playing piano well.
So pulling this all together,
Yeah.
what we've really unpacked from these sources is that sympathy, used this way, isn't just, being nice or having soft skills. It's presented as a genuinely powerful, almost strategic tool. And it's grounded in really deeply understanding and acknowledging the other person's perspective, validating their feelings, their desires, and recognizing this fundamental, maybe universal human craving for that validation.
The sources are pretty emphatic about that universal need. They quote a Dr. Arthur Feesgates, suggesting that sympathy is something the human species universally craves, even to the point where people, children or adults, might actively seek pity through self-pity over misfortunes, whether those misfortunes are real or imaginary.
That's quite a thought. That the craving is so strong, people might even invent reasons to get sympathy.
It suggests it's a really foundational driver of how we behave, doesn't it?
It does. So, thinking about this for you, the listener, how does this principle, being sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires, how could that apply in your own life, in those difficult conversations, or when you're trying to understand viewpoints really different from your own, or maybe even when trying to help someone you care about make a tough change for their own good?
And maybe take it a step further. If this fundamental need for sympathy, this constant craving the sources talk about, is indeed so universal and so potent, what does that really tell us about the hidden currents driving our everyday interactions, our behavior? How might just recognizing that constant craving for sympathy actually change how you approach, well, pretty much everyone you meet? Something to mull over.